Welcome to Finance Leaders Retirement Insights, the broadcast where we sit down with thought leaders in the world of finance who reveal their unexpected wisdom on the issues impacting retirement.
Welcome to the Finance Leaders Podcast. This is the show where we highlight the stories, insights, and expertise of financial professionals who are making a lasting impact on their clients and the industry. Today, we have a pleasure of speaking with Mike Faulhaber, a marine financial professional and dedicated mentor. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Hey, listen, before we dive in, I just want to thank you and take a moment to personally thank you for your service. It's truly an honor to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to serve, and I appreciate your support.
Awesome. Mike, your journey is pretty unique, from wrestling at the University of Northern Colorado to serving as a Marine and now mentoring financial advisors. When you look back, was there a definite moment that kind of pushed you in this direction?
Yeah, there was. I was working in the car business while I was wrapping up school. So I was on the practice squad there, as you mentioned, wrestling. I say I was a throwing dummy basically for the varsity guys up there in Greeley for a few years. And I'm a pretty big guy. You probably can't tell, but I'm over 6 feet, about 240 pounds. So you can imagine the size of the men that were just tossing me around like I was nothing. So but anyway, I say I was studying all the wrong things up in Greeley, and ended up transferring down to Metro State University to wrap up my schooling there, and was working. A lot of students at Metro are non-traditional students working full-time, going to school full-time, doing that sort of thing. And so I ended up working in the car business and stayed there after I graduated, got into finance there, helping folks with their loans and paperwork and things. And it was retail sales, right? And I noticed in retail, there's a lot of nights and weekends and holidays and that sort of thing. And being in finance, there's a lot of late nights where you're staying there to close the last deal to get everything papered and such. And I just recognized that that wasn't going to be a great fit for my work-life balance long term. I didn't have a family at the time, but I knew I wanted one. And I wanted to be, present for my wife and kids and that sort of thing. And so I was in my mid-20s at this point. My mentor, the head of finance there, was in his early mid-50s. And I basically told him what I just told you. And he said, well, Mike, you should go sell insurance. And I kind of looked at him crooked, like, okay, Mark, are we still having the same conversation here or what? And he said, no, yeah. He said, I had some buddies that had been in the insurance financial planning realm for 20, 30 years, and they have great work-life balance. They coach their kids' teams, they play golf on Fridays, they basically do whatever they want. And so honestly, purely based on that recommendation, I went the very next week to a career fair that Metro State was having, and I signed up to interview with every company there that had anything to do with insurance. Two of the companies were more holistic financial planning. They were doing both insurance and investments, and that was really appealing to me. And that was the catalyst that has now been a 20-year career.
Oh, that's awesome. So you talk a lot about growth, both personally and professionally. If you had to pick kind of one period in your life where you experienced the most growth, what would it be? And what was kind of happening at that time?
Oh man, that's a good question. Professionally, I feel like I'm sort of addicted to learning and growing. You can see the designations behind me here and the alphabet soup behind my name. I say, that professional designations are kind of like tattoos. You don't see many people that just have one. And the sort of like schooling, they pull you in to say, well, you did all this work, but if you only take 2 more classes here or 3 more classes there, you end up with another set of letters. So I don't, there's my wife and I have been together for 11 years now, and in that time period, there hasn't been a time where I wasn't studying for something until currently. So I would say it's a long period, but the last 15-ish years. I've been constantly, studying for another exam or another designation. I wrapped up my MBA last August, and so yeah, there was a time period. I guess that if I had to narrow in a focus, it was probably in the early teens, like the 2010, 2011. I pushed through and got most of the designations that I have. I pushed through in that period. Similar with licensing, I shifted my focus from training and development to compliance. And in order to be the compliance officer for the firm I was with, I had to have the Series 7, Series 66, the Series 9, and the Series 10. And so if you broker check me, you'll see there's a two or 3 months there in 2011 where I passed all 4 exams. That was awful time. So that was probably the catalyst that pushed me forced me into growth, if you will, like that compression to have to get things done quickly.
Yeah, well, I partly understand what it is. I got my CFP designation back in 2009, but I'm a recovering CFP now. I'm no longer in it because I kind of got out of the industry a little bit as an advisor, so it wasn't that important. But yeah, I tell people doing the CFP exam was the most messed up exam of my life that I have gone and written. It was 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, and it was like I feel it was more about time management then I mean, obviously you have to know the information, but the people that did not pass at that time was because they didn't manage the time. Like I knew exactly that I had X amount of minutes per question. If I didn't know it, I skipped it and I went through all of them, and then I went back. I think a lot of people get stuck on a question and then they're stuck.
Yeah, you're right, and just having the stamina, right, to have the brain power to be able to focus for that long period. You're spot on. I've always heard, especially the cases, right? You get caught up in the drama behind the case studies, and that's where it can be a real time.
Well, the advice that I had is, Daniel, check your brain at the door. Don't try to get creative. Answer the question that they're asking. And they're asking a question, they don't want a story. They want to answer to that because, if they're marking it, they don't want to have long drawn out. They were looking at for specific things. So, yeah, that's that comes down to kind of the dedication and, your military background means that you really worked under a lot of high pressure, made a lot of quick decisions, and probably developed a unique way of looking at challenges. How has that really shaped the way that you approach your work today?
That's a great question. So I was in the Marine Corps Reserves. I went to boot camp the spring of my freshman year of college, and then got out. I did 6 years. It took me 6 years to get through my undergrad due to going to boot camp. I lost some time, and then went to artillery school, lost some time. And then when I'm interviewing students, I joke with them and I say I got to do a semester abroad. My senior year, my unit got activated for the Iraqi freedom for the Iraq War, and so I lost more time there, and came back and graduated, and then shortly after graduating, I got out. I think there's an element of discipline that comes in the military, and having to basically, like you said, react, right, follow orders instantly, and then ask questions after. Because you could be in a life or death situation. So that's part of the training that gets ingrained. Following through and completing the task, I think, is another element of it. But more than anything, I think what I got from my time in the Marines was just an appreciation for life and the little things that we take for granted, like warm beds and showers and a hot meal and things of that nature. I think more than anything, I say God sent me to the desert to figure some stuff out, and that was literally where I was for most of my time out there in Kuwait.
Yeah, well, again, appreciate the work that you have done there and your service. It's really awesome to hear. Now, I saw on your LinkedIn profile a quote from Jim Rohn that you used that really stuck with me, that the fastest and the best way to get what you want is to help others to get what they want. That partly what this podcast is all about, giving back and helping, advisors to grow. Now, for you, mentorship has been such a big part of your career. Can you think of time when guiding someone led to a breakthrough for them?
Breakthrough. Yeah, it's interesting that you use that word actually, Daniel, because the first coaching certification program that I went through was with the firm. I was with Northwestern Mutual for almost 16 years, and they have a I believe they still have it. It's literally called Breakthrough Coaching, and so I became a breakthrough coach in that same time frame around 2010. And then after that, got certified as a life coach, and my emphasis in my MBA was actually executive coaching as well. So that there's a coaching element of my career that I've always really loved. And it's because of what you're describing there, that the impact that we can have by coaching and developing and mentoring and pouring into others, and being able to see the breakthrough in them is rewarding, right? Almost like philanthropy when you're giving back and giving gifts, right? The act of giving, you tend to receive so much more than the gift itself. And so, yeah, there's been tremendous times and opportunities where I was coaching someone and seeing them actually fulfill the goal that they had for themselves. There's an element of breakthrough coaching that I call stupid human tricks, where we basically try to get the two parts of our brain is the idea where we have like a primitive guidance system and an intelligent guidance system. And the intelligent guidance system is basically knowing what we should do. And then the primitive guidance system is just very reactive, going towards what we want. And it's much stronger, right? The intelligence says, oh yeah, I should wake up early and go to the gym. I should skip dessert. I should eat better. I should do all these things. I say we should all over ourselves. And the idea of the primitive is like, nope, it's shiny. I want it. I'm going. So it's much stronger. So the idea is to try to get those two pieces of our mind pulling in the same direction. And oftentimes it's a little tweak to guide the primitive guidance system and create something on purpose internally that's either more attractive or more painful, kind of the carrot or stick idea, to get that primitive guidance system pulling in the same direction that our intelligent guidance system knows they should go. So yeah, as several folks I've had the opportunity to coach in that space, and very successful.
Yeah, no, great analogy. Like you said, the primitive, the only reason the primitive side of things of our brain is there to keep us safe. So whenever you do anything new, not even dangerous, anything new, our brains, that part of our brain right away goes danger, danger, danger. No, stay where you are at. Don't get excited.
Exactly.
Don't go there. And
Exactly.
Most people don't understand that, and they don't understand how come I should go and do something. One of my hobbies right now is I do live up in Canada. It's winter in here. Every day for the last 3.5 months, I go down, jog down to the lake, and I hop in just in my shorts and get out, even when it's below freezing temperatures up there.
Okay. Oh.
And I've been doing it for 4 years. It's actually has become, I would call it a fun, where people look at me going like, "What do you mean fun?" That again, I just learned to turn off that brain, part of the brain where I'm actually looking forward to it, right? And again, it's being able to go and challenge that, where most of the time my brain's telling me like, what are you doing? This is crazy. What has helped with that? And I've been doing it for 4 years. Now there's a group of people they're going to go every single day. But I've noticed a difference now that gives me a little bit more purpose, because there's a group of other individuals that are kind of have the same goal, and we kind of share what we're doing, and sharing the pictures and all that. But it's really learning to turn off that side of the brain. And I'm sure when you went through your training as a Marine, that's the whole purpose of all of the training, is how to turn that part of your brain that basically says, oh, this is crazy, I should not be doing this, and you go and do it. So
very big part. And it's amazing how any threat, right, whether it's real or not, and that's really when we break it down, right, the fear isn't real, right, because I could be standing at that lake and my brain saying, no way am I doing that, because I'm scared ultimately. and you just running in and saying, no, man, come on, I do this, I do this every day. And you're not afraid because you've done it. And, just amazing how our brains work. And I've heard, thankfully I didn't have to see or do anything too horrible or traumatizing in my time in the Marines. I've certainly known a lot of folks that have unfortunately had to deal with those type of things. And even in our business, right, just the idea of picking up a phone and calling someone or reaching out to somebody has the same danger, right? Like I've actually talked to former military personnel who actually were in combat, and they say that they're just as scared to pick up the phone as they were to storm into a building or something like that. And it's just amazing how the mind works in that way.
Yeah, no, that whole fear, it does matter what it is. Again, like you talked about and used the words primitive part of brain. It doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. It's just constantly, the purpose of it is just to keep us safe. And sometimes when there are situations that are happening that are actually to help us or to save us, our brain, that part of the brain, doesn't know that. And it's still fighting for that. There was a great exercise, part of person development. I did courses where you got somebody sitting in a chair and you ask them to put their hands in front of them. And then naturally, when you go and push on them, people will go and resist. What they don't realize, when you resist and you're sitting on a four-legged chair, you will tip over. So, the natural, and you said it just happens naturally. People don't think about it. They just want to go and resist. What they don't realize, if they, instead of having their arms straight out, they let go, there is no way how somebody can push you over now, right? Because you're not resisting. So again, those are kind of I call them the principles of how life works. And so often people don't go and examine these things. So when someone, whether it's an advisor or a client, comes to you feeling stuck, what's the first thing that you do to help them to get unstuck? Do you have like a go-to approach for getting people to see their path forward?
Yeah, usually the first thing that I'll ask them is around their mission and vision and values. I think there's fundamental keys. For example, if I was to ask a simple question, well, it sounds like a simple question, but one of the first things I'll say is, if I was to ask you what your top 5 values are, what would you say? And if they can't rattle off, for me, it's faith, love, hope, providing, and joy. Those are my top 5. And if they can't rattle them off, if they're like stumbling and like, oh, well, I know I value this, and this would definitely be on the list, right? You can tell they haven't really thought through what those are. If they haven't, well, then that's the first place we go. Like, okay, we need to figure out what your top 5 values are so that you can make decisions through that lens, right? And then the idea of vision and mission. Right? So why are you doing this? What is the mission, and what are you trying to accomplish? What's the vision? Usually, if somebody's stuck in any area of their life, it's that they're kind of lost in purpose.
Yeah, you bring a great point out. And again, it's that emotional side of things that really gets us connected to who we are and what we're doing. And I think that's the part that, again, a lot of people don't understand, that when you look at pretty well everything that you've done in your life, you've done because you wanted to. There is a quote, I think I just heard it recently and it really resonated with me. I think it was Zig Ziglar that basically said, I realized that my entire life I chose to be fat, because I've never put anything in my mouth by mistake. Like everything that I ate was on purpose. So therefore, if I'm, overweight, if I'm fat, it was a choice. And I realized that. And then he says, until I decided not to. And again, it's kind of looking at things a little bit more from, again, talking about principles. And a lot of principles are almost counterintuitive, where, a lot of people would not look at their life from that perspective. They're looking at, well, look at me, I'm overweight. My story is back in 2006, I was 260 pounds. I'm about 175 right now.
Wow.
And I lost, close to 90 pounds. And it was the simplest and easiest thing to do, because I changed my view about food and what I looked at and understood what the purpose of food is. But a lot of people tend to look at it that way. Well, I don't have a choice. This is where I'm at. It's difficult to have something different, but they don't realize that they have a choice. And again, when it comes down to losing weight, it's fairly simple equation: calories in, calories out. Like it kind of works
Right.
like gravity, right? Like it's not a rocket science, but a lot of
Mhm.
people don't tend to look at it that way, that they're making that choice. And they don't know how to make that choice because again, it's more comfortable not to. Again, that primitive brain says, no, I don't really feel like going to the gym right now. I'd rather go and sit here and eat that cake. Well, again, because that's a lot more comfortable than going to the gym. One of my mentors, he has a great saying, and I love this. He said, listen, you can be in pain when you're healthy, meaning you go and exercise and you do all of these things, or you can be in pain when you're sick.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't matter. You're going to be in pain. Like you just choose the one that you want to have. And for me right now, I'm choosing to be in pain, like, going down to the lake. You know what? It's not that it's not, I wouldn't say it's painful at this point. I mean, it still doesn't make sense where, like I said, it's below freezing. I'm in my shorts and I'm running after I just spent, 5 minutes in the lake. It takes about 10 minutes to run home. By the time I get home, I'm like, I could stay outside for another hour. It literally doesn't make sense that my body's capable of doing that. And even after 4 years of doing this, yet I'm experiencing it. So, somebody else looking at it going like, that's completely crazy. But it's quite incredible what our bodies can do when we are just open to it, that we can go and take it. And I'm sure when you were doing some of the training with the Marines, uh, maybe it was uncomfortable, but were you kind of surprised by some of the things that, hey, wow, I can't believe that I was actually able to accomplish some of these things?
Yeah, being able to push through, like you're saying, choose your hard, right? Like things are hard, life is hard, and when we choose to take responsibility and recognize that we are at choice, and when we own those choices, I think that can be a huge shift in where we go with our life. Right? And certainly, yeah, getting through boot camp, I look back and I say, I don't think I could get through it again now that I know what it was. And
Yeah,
I look at folks like the Navy SEALs, for example, knowing that that bell is just there on the beach, and all they have to do is go ring the bell, and it's over.
yeah,
I honestly don't think I could ever get through that, uh, knowing how easy it is to quit,
okay,
right? And
yeah,
you hear, I don't know if you're familiar with David Goggins,
yeah,
but man, that guy going through Hell Week 3 times, just blows my mind. The
yeah,
mental ability that he has, and that 40% rule that the Navy SEALs talk about, where when we believe we're ready to quit mentally, we've only tapped into 40% of
yeah,
capability that our body is capable of. I mean, that
yeah,
just blows your mind what you can push through, and relating that to our business, studying for exams,
yeah,
pushing through and making the points of contact. To your point, the CFP was for me too, also the probably the hardest exam that I've ever taken. I did that back in 2016, and gosh, when you did yours, you were still it was still paper and
yeah,
Scantron bubble sheets, right? And that was one of the reasons why I never did it, because it was 2 days and paper, and you didn't find out if you passed for like a couple months, right?
yeah.
I'm not doing that. Um,
Yeah. And
uh,
and at that time it was only, I think it was 30% passing grade. And I don't even think that was for the first time. Like there were a lot of people that were doing second and third time. I passed it on the
uh,
first time, and a lot of people and again, it took dedication. Like I didn't go to family events. I'm like, I've got to go and do this. I don't want to do this again. Like I passed it the first time or I'm not doing it. So again, it's kind of making that decision and going through there. But yeah, it was nerve-wracking because yeah, I go write the exam and then it took like 2 or 3 months to get the answer. And it's like not knowing. So
uh,
things
I
are
mean,
things are a bit easier these days.
yeah, at least you get a tentative pass, right? Like mine was on computer, and as soon as it was done, you had this. Uh, Probably it was only 5 seconds, but it felt like an hour just waiting, watching the little spinning
Uh,
to let you know if they think you passed or not.
yeah,
And I can't imagine waiting months.
yeah. No, yeah. Again, I think what you're mentioning, when you're going through something the first time, you don't know what it is. That's why, like now, it's my fourth year going down to the lake, and it's interesting. I've done it now for 3.5 months, every single day that I've been going. But there comes time around February or March in the past few years where I just get bored and I stopped. And I'm like, no, no, this year I want to do like full 6 months. Maybe I'll do a whole year round. But it was interesting. The first year I remember, you know, once I ran, and I don't know what it's in Fahrenheit, but it was like minus 20 degrees. The temperature was like with the wind chill was minus 40, and I'm running. I got home and I'm like going, everything else from now on is going to be boring because I've
Wow.
already achieved this. So it was a
Mhm.
matter of challenging myself and making it more of a game. And that's what's happening right now. Like it's actually fun. I actually have a YouTube channel where I do post a video. Like 2 days ago, 60 km/h winds. I'm sitting in the hole. There's a 3 foot drift above there. After 2 minutes sitting in the water, I'm just completely covered. My head and everything's covered in snow. And I'm like laughing because it's actually enjoyable. It's fun. And I think this is where it comes down. And when you're going through these things, and you mentioned that before, when you find what your purpose is, what your values are, it's not about what you're doing, it's who you're being. It
Mm.
has that different shift. And now you have a purpose. You mentioned, meeting with somebody, for the first time, start asking them what their values are, what their purpose is, why they do what they do. Because I know that when you were going through uh, you know, through the boot camp, you had a purpose, you had a mission, you had a vision. Because if you didn't, you would have not made it through it. Would you agree
Mhm.
with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, back then I think I was 19 years old at the time, and I had a chip on my shoulder with the marketing for the Marines says maybe you can be one of us. The few, the proud, the Marines, they're saying, and I had this chip on my shoulder, like maybe, like I wanted to prove
Yeah.
to myself that I could become a Marine, and yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's awesome. And again, sometimes just that, determination and trying to prove somebody wrong can be used as a fuel. Unfortunately, I
Absolutely.
find a lot of people that things that have happened to them in the past, they become a victim. But I think there is a way to, raise above that. So I know you spend a lot of time, recruiting and mentoring financial advisors. From everything you've seen, what do you think is kind of the biggest reasons advisors struggle to build successful practice, and what's the first thing they should really focus on to overcome that?
I think at the end of the day, the number one thing tends to be prospecting in some form or fashion. Right? It's finding the people uh, that are in a position to move forward and take advantage of the products and services that the advisor is offering, in whatever model they might be in, whether it's heavily insurance, heavily investment, or anywhere in between. It's finding the clientele
Mm.
and ultimately having the willingness to do what it takes. So I say, there's that old saying, ready, willing, and able, right? The folks that get recruited into our industry, they're ready, right? They're making the jump. Maybe it's their first career, maybe a second career move, or what have you. So they're ready to jump in and give it a shot. They are able, right? Like we in our industry on the recruiting side, companies spend literally millions of dollars in recruiting and developing advisors and trying to figure out exactly what we're talking about right now, like what is the special sauce, right, to get advisors to be successful. And so we do a fairly good job, I think, of filtering through and trying to find the people that have the ability to be successful. So they're ready and they are able.
Yeah.
The difficulty lies in between. Are they willing?
Yeah.
Right? Are they willing to take the cold plunge and actually jump in and do the work that is required, no matter how sophisticated we get, no matter how many licenses and designations that we earn, no matter how good the financial planning software is, or the CRM system, or what have you. At the end of the day, if they're not willing to do the work, it's just not going to work out.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, there has to be that do part. I think the biggest part of it is them not realizing that the financial business is not about money. It's about relationships. And what I
Mm-hmm.
find working with advisors, that the ones that struggle the most is them not understanding that if you are not able to go and build a relationship with the prospect, unless you position yourself just as a commodity, just selling, like term insurance, and that's all you do, or Medicare or something like that, that's very commodity type of sale. But if you truly want to go and do, investments or advanced insurance or some of these things. It's all about the relationships, because what I found that wealthy people, they buy from people they know, like, and trust. They buy within a network, and if the advisor is able to go and build and position themselves as that go-to person within a certain network, or they have the ability to really build a relationship so that the prospect feels comfortable or the client feels comfortable having a conversation around this, that's really important. Because, like I said, what I've learned before I kind of stepped out of the industry is it's all about a relationship. I thought getting my CFP was going to change business. After getting the designation, it made no difference in my business as far as getting more of it. But I started to realize that really people, what they're looking for is, if they have a problem, they're looking for a solution. And if you can show them that you can solve that problem, you can build that relationship with them, you're going to be more successful. So
I agree,
your
100%.
your uh, thanks. Your mission statement is all about giving, aligning, and you just mentioned that, actions with intention. I love that, what you just mentioned. Can you think of a specific time where you help someone kind of bridge that gap, where they finally kind of got their actions together to match what they truly wanted?
Yeah, and it's a lot of so yeah, I say that my personal mission is to provide guidance and understanding, helping others align their actions with intentions. Right? And it's going back to those two guidance systems, the intentions that we have, and the intelligence guidance system that say, I should reach out to so many people, I should join the networking group, I should go to find centers of influence, or I should talk to the people that I have some kind of trust with already, and just breach the conversation and just see if I can help them in any way. And then that fear that we talked about earlier with the primitive guidance system that's holding us back for whatever reason. Usually it's a fear of being disliked, or fear of rejection. Right? And there's actually a great book called The Courage to Be Disliked, that I really, really like, because it leans into that exact piece, that we can only control ourselves and how we react, and not how others react or respond. And so, yeah, dealing with individuals and working through this, it brings back that idea that I mentioned of stupid human trick, where we're trying to get that primitive guidance system pulling in the same direction. And so I had a advisor that I was coaching that hated running, for example. Is a very simple idea. He wanted to get back in shape, but he despised cardio. Like he really didn't want to run. And for his business, he really struggled with reaching out to the certain number of prospects every day. So we set up a deal where if he did the points of contact that he needed to do, then he didn't have to run that day. And if he fell short, then he had to. We had this was in Boulder, Colorado, which has a lot of great outdoor opportunities, and there was a trail right by our office. So if he fell short, he had to switch, change over to his running shoes and go run at least a mile. And he despised running, right? But in the Marines, we had a saying: you're either going to get smart or you're going to get strong. And so either way, right, he was either going to do something good for himself physically, or he's going to do something good for himself professionally. And it worked out really well. He actually he hated running so much that he, again, it pushed that primitive part of his brain to say, no, I don't want to run. I'll make the calls. I'll make the calls, but I don't want to run, to get it pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, no, that's a great story. Again, it's all about the motivation, and it's a lot easier to do things when you choose to do it, instead of you feel like you're kind of forced into it. But turning life into a game, or work into a game, certainly becomes much easier to go and accomplish the tasks that you have. So that's a great story. The financial industry is always shifting, and there are new trends, new technology, new challenges. How do you stay ahead of it all, and what's kind of the major shift that you see coming that advisors need to be paying attention to?
That's a great question. Definitely a challenge for sure. I think depending on what company you're aligned to, there's folks that are tied to that and looking at that, whether they're building software internally or looking externally for solutions. I think integration is one of the biggest things that agents and advisors are always looking for, to have systems that talk to each other, to reduce manual input, and to have follow-ups and different things readily available. That's probably the biggest thing that I see that companies always seem to struggle with, is how do we get, especially when we do both, insurance and investments, how do we get everything to talk to each other? And on the investment side, so many different ways to approach it. So different accounts, different money managers, different direct to fund, mutual fund companies, or what have you. How do we get all the different heads to talk to each other and integrate? I think that's probably the cutting edge, I would say, that's coming. Certainly seems like there's a lot of digital assets and cryptocurrencies and different things that seem to be becoming more and more acceptable, I guess, to folks that are not high risk or speculative investors. And so having crypto ETFs and that sort of thing seems to be there's some more regulation, I guess, at the end of the day, coming into that space and making it more mainstream, if you will. And so, yeah, I think I don't know, it's hard. I basically just listen and trust the powers that be that are above my pay grade, that say, hey, here's what we're doing. I guess it comes back to choice, right? And controlling what you can. And, we can either take what we have and make the best of it and focus on, again, going back to the mission and vision, focus on what we're trying to accomplish, or we can complain about what we have and fall short.
Yeah. Well, again, technology is making a lot of changes. It's a challenge that when I got into the business 30 years ago, that you mentioned CRM and making systems talk to each other. That was so frustrating because, at the time I was doing investments and we had to keep it physically in a separate files, and everything had to be separate, and insurance had to be separate because of compliance and all these things. So yeah, that's still a challenge that's plaguing a lot of advisors. I think biggest thing is to come up with systems and processes. And there's a great book for advisors that they can actually go, and the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I think there is an E-Myth for financial advisors that again talks about this whole thing, that having systems and processes. Because the story you actually shared about the advisor that did not like to pick up that phone and make that phone call, you just created a better system that actually served him. And the system is like, do this, or if you don't, you got to do this. So there was a bit of a game, but essentially that was a kind of a simple way of having a system or a process. Often when I talk to advisors, I tell them, I call it swinging for singles. And it's like, if you build your life in a way, kind of like in a game of baseball, don't go out at the home plate trying to swing for a home run, because like World Series are never won by home runs. Just focus on, how do I step up to the plate? What's that one thing that I can do today that's going to get me from the home plate to first base? Right? Just focus on that instead of trying to make this big jump, right? Just go and do that. Because tomorrow when you show up and you do the same thing, within 3 or 4 days, you're bringing people home. You're going to have success because now you've created a system where you're not trying to focus on having this big goal or trying to do something really big. You've created a system and a process where you just show up, you know exactly what you need to do. And I think you might find this. I know with working with advisors, they show up in the office and that day they're trying to figure out what to do. And I'm like, you're already starting behind. You should show up at the office and already have a list, already know what you need to be doing. Because if you don't, you're going to spend the first couple hours just figuring out what to do. Next thing you know, it's lunch. Next thing you know, somebody, if you're working in the office, when I was in the insurance, I was kind of on the corporate side for a little bit too. I didn't want to have an office where there were other people around. I just had a home office, because what would happen, somebody drops by, you start talking to them, and then making those phone calls. It's not just a matter of, I don't want to make the phone calls. You will have a million excuses why not to, because of things are just going to pop up and happen. So it's kind of managing that time. But it's all about building systems and processes.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. In fact, one of my favorite quotes is by James Clear, that comes from Atomic Habits, where he says that we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. right? And that's exactly what you're saying, right? We because goals so often have emotion tied to it, right? But systems are emotionless.
Yeah.
It's another gentleman that I love is a guy named Ben Newman who shares standards over feelings. Is his big mantra, right? To say that again, we have to do what we have to do regardless of how we feel about it. That's the
Yeah.
standard.
You bring a great point, and I just kind of had a reflection. Me going down to the lake, it's a system now. I know that if I make the decision, I go put my shorts on. I don't care what the temperature is outside. I just go and start running. And there were days where I'm running back, and I'm going, I don't remember being on the sidewalk. There was more snow that, like, I don't even know what happens. Once I get down to the lake, I don't think about, oh, the water's going to be cold. I just go in. So once you have systems and processes, you start to turn off. We're talking about that primitive part of your brain where the system takes over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just following the system as opposed to allowing that primitive brain to stop you and start thinking about and overthinking and keeping you safe. You just kind of go with the flow when you have a system and a process. Because if you don't, I like the book. Yeah, you just mentioned Atomic Habits, where he talks about we fall down to the lowest system. I
Mm-hmm.
100% agree with that. And it's, again, most people don't realize that the success or the lack of success they have in their life is because of the small, insignificant daily decisions they have made over a long period of time. They think that difference is going to happen in their life if they make this one big decision. It's like, no, no, no. It's the things you do on a daily basis that seem insignificant, but you stack them up every single day over and over and over again. That's what's giving you the results that you're having.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Darren Hardy's compound effect. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're familiar.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
But absolutely, it's the small, seemingly insignificant, right, choices that we make,
Yeah.
and our brains are designed to save energy, right? They're designed to create shortcuts, and that's exactly what happens when we build a habit. Is we build this new neuro path in our brain and it becomes systematic and monotonous and easy because our brain has built it that way. The flip side of that too is when we want to keep something important in front of us. Maybe it's a saying, maybe it's our mission, maybe it's a top priority for the year or something like that. We also have to shift and change that around. For example, maybe it's a sticky note on your desk or something that you've written on your mirror. We'll actually forget that it's there and forget to read it. Maybe it's a mantra or something, right? Because the same thing happens, right? Our brain just gets used to it and forgets where
Becomes part of the environment. You don't even notice it. Yeah.
yeah.
I've had a lot of people that told me, Daniel, I'm just, especially when working with advisors, I'm just not, I'm very inconsistent. Like, when it comes down to doing the phone calls, and I'm like going, hold on, you need to shift your view. It's not that you're not inconsistent. It is that you're consistent, right, with the wrong things.
Mm.
And again, people try to blame like, oh, I'm inconsistent. I don't have the, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not able to do things over and over again. And I'm like, no, no, the reality is you just are very consistent doing the wrong things. You need to shift that. You need to make that change, because the problem is never with consistency. It's just, what are you consistent with? And again, a lot of people don't kind of look at it that way, that, they're very consistent at being comfortable. Well, hey, let's go and flip that around. Start being uncomfortable, and you will become, consistent with the things that you feel like you're not good at.
Yeah, very true.
So you've led a lot of teams, mentored a lot of advisors, helped people grow. In your experience, what separates kind of the good leader from a great one in the financial industry?
From the leadership side, I've always thought that leading by example is super important, but I don't know that it necessarily has to be the example of being a top end producer or something to that effect. Okay. I think oftentimes, I think in every industry, some of the top producers get moved into management or leadership, and they fall on their face because they're extremely unique, and they don't really know necessarily what they did to be so good, right? So to have them teach others, like, well, I just did it. Right? Like they just had something ingrained in their DNA to help them to be top performers. So oftentimes leaving folks in that top performance role is by far the best thing you can do. for the organization. I think from a leadership perspective, again, leading by example doesn't necessarily mean that you have to show that you can close a big case or something like that, right? Like it can be, well, I'm pursuing something, right? I'm pursuing a health goal or a professional designation or whatever it is, and showing that you can fight through and battle and do the hard things, and prove to them that they can, to show them that I'm doing hard things, you can do hard things, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same hard thing. It can just be a challenge that you're challenging for yourself. So yeah, I think leading by example certainly important. Having empathy, I think, is important, but I think that it also has to come with this balance of being willing to challenge people. I used to have a sign up next to my computer that said, "Help them grow." Mm. And what that meant for me was, I have a pretty good sense, like a sixth sense, if you will, of when it's like something's coming up for me. And I used to, early on in my career, stuff that away, like thinking that feeling meant that I needed to just be quiet and not say anything. And what I recognized was that actually that feeling that was coming up for me was my body telling me, hey, you need to challenge what this person is doing or saying, and confront them on it, not violently or anything, but to just challenge them and help them recognize that there's something there that they need to probably push through. And so helping them grow, at the end of the day, I say they may not like me, but they will respect me. Yeah. Right. And having that, again, that courage to be disliked, going back to that, because I think in leadership, we have the same fears, right? Of fear of rejection and fear of people not liking us. And in this case, it's, your direct reports or the advisors that you're supporting versus your clientele. It's that same thing, to have that courage to be disliked and recognize that, if I just pat somebody on the back and then ultimately just pat them right out the door onto their next career because I didn't challenge them to do what they needed to do to be successful, well, then I failed them. Yeah. But if I'm willing to challenge them and tell them what they need to hear and have those hard conversations and push them to do what they need to do to be successful, they might hate me for it, right? I remember Michael Jordan in one of his, I think it was his Hall of Fame speech, where he despised his trainer. he hated the guy, but he kept going to him because he knew that he made him better.
Yeah. Well, it's making people aware. I think that's what it comes down to. And again, when you go into the mentorship and coaching, it's not really trying to tell somebody, hey, look, you're doing this wrong. It's just making them aware of that maybe what they're doing and how they're doing it is leading them to have that situation where they're not happy with, where if they're maybe just shifted and looked at it from a different perspective, they can have different results. Because I started to live in the world where I don't look at things, there is a right or wrong decision. It's just a decision. I get to decide what label I put on it. And often I found when it comes to life, that life is either working for me or my life is working on me until it can work for me. So there is no losing. There is no win and lose. Again, I kind of came from the world where everything was right, wrong, win and lose. And I start to realize that really principles in life, that life kind of conspires all the time to help me to achieve my best version of myself. I might not understand what's happening to me when somebody's challenging me or what's happening. We just need to be open and be aware that what we look at as something working against us is actually there to potentially teach us a lesson, or there's a lesson we can extract from that. And I think that's what it comes down to. You're kind of using the word somebody hating me and all of that stuff. Yeah, I've said some things to people that it was uncomfortable, but at the end, we do it from love because we care for them and we want them to become best version of themselves. Right? Right. So when you look at all the relationships that you built over the years, whether it was with a client or maybe with an advisor, is there one that really stands out particularly meaningfully to you, and that you have kind of gone through? Kind of what made that connection so strong, and really helped you to even change your view and perspective?
Yeah, there's a few that are coming up for me. Fell in love with this industry, right, in the business of financial planning, and so much so that I encouraged my brother to come into the business. I encouraged my stepson to come into the business. And so, yeah, great relationships, both personally and professionally, that were built inside of this business, and within the career to really build deep, caring relationships with people that I love, to be better and be able to impact others. Like, going back to that quote, where our business is exactly that. When you approach it correctly, and are truly coming from the heart, like you mentioned earlier, and giving back to your clients and helping them fulfill the things that they want and need, you're able to reap the rewards from that. Right? Like, it's such an amazing business where we can get what we want out of our lives by helping others get what they want in their lives.
Yeah, you bring a great point. Like, I think a lot of people have the misconception and misunderstanding, especially when it comes down to the financial industry or financial planning, or they hesitate to take action because of certain beliefs they have around money. What do you find is what's kind of the biggest misconception that you run into on how do you help people to kind of see things a little bit differently? Again, we talked about that from a little bit different perspective, because there isn't a right or wrong way to do it. There is just a way to do it, but there is probably a million different views or outlooks on that. Everybody kind of looks at it a little bit different.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right? Like, if you ask 100 different financial, even just people with the same title, right? If you asked 100 different financial advisors, what do you actually do? The answer to that question is going to be different. And how do you approach, a certain situation from a portfolio makeup standpoint? Do you use insurance or not use insurance? Do you use annuities or not use annuities? To your point, right? There's so many different solutions to a certain problem. It can be confusing. I think probably the biggest misconception that we run into is that people think that they are the only ones that don't have everything figured out, that they're the only ones, right, that aren't all set, and that they can't, quote unquote, afford to have an advisor to help them. And I think that's just wrong. I mean, certainly, I always joke and say that Biggie Smalls was right when he said, "More money, more problems." The more money, the more wealth that someone has, they do have more problems in our world of taxation and transfer of wealth and all these different things that do warrant the need and necessity for a financial advisor. But that doesn't discount the fact that there's people out there in our industry that want to help. Just the regular mom and pop small business, the person that's just graduated college that has their first opportunity with group benefits and that sort of thing, and everywhere in between. So that would probably be the biggest thing that I see.
Yeah, no, that's great, and 100% agree with you. It's people looking at things a little bit differently and just getting a little bit different understanding, and having that third party looking at your finances can help you see what you can't see. Because so often, the analogy that I hear the best, I'm not much of a golfer, but you know what, when you're standing and holding the golf club and you're swinging, you can't see what you're doing. If somebody is looking, standing in front of you a couple feet away, they can see things you can't see. Same thing with the finances. When you're in it, you can't really see what's there, and having that, help from somebody give you that kind of the different perspective can be incredibly helpful. Now, looking back at your own career, if you could go back and give advice to a version of yourself just starting out, what would you say?
That's a great question. I think if I could go back and talk to my younger self, I think the advice I would give is it's quite honestly, just do what you're told, right? Lean into the fear and do what you're told. Right? Like, I had chip on my shoulder to get through Marine boot camp to see if I could become one of the few and the proud. I had this idea when I came into this business. They said, well, Mike, you need to work hard and you need to be disciplined. I'm like, well, okay, I think I've got that through, Marine experience, wrestling in college, doing all these things. I thought, sure, I have the work ethic and the discipline. And then they gave me a system that had the science behind building the business, and I thought that I could beat the system, and I was wrong, right? Like ultimately,
don't we all always think that we've got better ideas than somebody else?
Right, exactly. And so I joke and say, uh, the Indiana Jones movies, but there's one, I can't remember which one it was, but there's a scene where Indiana Jones has been captured and he's chained up on this thing, and the guy, the villain, makes him drink this cup of blood or something that's making him hallucinate or something, and he says, "Galima Shakti Day, Dr. Jones, you will become a true believer." And I joke and say, look, you kind of got to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit in this business, and just accept that the business has been around for hundreds of years. There's the systems and processes that have been put in place are there for a reason. And if you can statistically beat the system, great, more power to you. But why not do the activity, right? Like that's what it comes down to, is having high activity and thinking that you can do just as good with, right? And then ultimately digging into the fear behind that. Right? Like what are you afraid of? Ultimately, and talking to myself and saying, Mike, what are you truly afraid of? If you think you can do this better by doing less activity, there's something else underneath that that's saying, you're scared of something, right? And ultimately for me, it was a fear of rejection and not wanting to reach out to enough people to build up the activity to truly find the success that's possible in our industry.
Yeah, we're back to building systems and processing, but I think the biggest thing is that most people are looking for the latest tactic, or they're looking at for well, I'm just going to go and post content, or I'm just going to go on TikTok or whatever that might be, new tool that comes out, and they put so much focus on it. What they're missing is that there are some guiding principles. To build a business, you need to do certain things. Now, you mentioned kind of the guiding principles that you have of balance, excellence, service, and truth. And you mentioned that they're a huge part of how you operate. Which of these has been kind of the, let's ask this question, most challenging to maintain, and how do you make sure that, you stay true to these principles?
Oh, yeah, another great question. Probably the hardest one in there, excellence. I think, with having the right systems in place with excellence, service, and truth, I think are pretty, I don't want to say easy to maintain, but I have the systems in place to run well in those areas. The balance piece is interesting to me in growth, right? Like I've had those ideas for a really long time, and balance itself, I think, is oftentimes misunderstood, because if we think about what the definition of balance is, it's exactly balanced, right? And oftentimes we'll hear people say, oh, I really want work-life balance, or I need to find balance in my life, or whatever that is. And the reality is we don't really want balance, right? And life doesn't give us balance, ultimately. What we need to be, ultimately, there's a gentleman named Dan Thurman who I love. He wrote a book called Off Balance on Purpose. And that he's an acrobat by trade, and a performer. And seeing him do a handstand like nothing, right? The strength that he has is amazing. But he so I see this guy do a handstand on a platform, and he just pushes himself up, full handstand, and just holds it for, he could probably do it all day. And he comes down, and then he looks in the camera, and he says, okay, was I balanced? And of course, we're like, yes, that was amazing. You just did a handstand and you were balanced. And he rewinds the tape and he says, no, actually, watch this. And he's constantly adjusting, right? He's
Yeah.
constantly adjusting to stay up. And that's the thing, is there's different elements of our life that we have to figure out. And sometimes, my kids need more energy. Sometimes my wife needs more energy. Sometimes my work needs more energy. And so it's this constant, almost like tightrope act where we are constantly adjusting to the different elements of our life to find what we say is balance, right? But ultimately accepting that we are, to again quote the title of the book, off balance on purpose, right? And that filters back to, do you know your values? Do you know your purpose? Do you know your vision, your mission? And ultimately, are you making sure that your priorities are in line? Because going back to the fact that we have choice, right? Yeah. Every choice that I make, right? You and I having this conversation and saying yes to meeting this morning means that we both said no to other things, right? And so we have to choose if saying yes to having this conversation is worth saying no to anything else that we could be doing at this time.
It comes down to focus. I think that's kind of what you're mentioning, right? So that there is no balance. I don't know if you've heard of Buckminster Fuller, but when I did some personal development, we need to realize that, well, let me ask you this. Would you say that when we walk, we are able to walk in a straight line?
That's hard. I guess it depends on how wide the line is.
So the reason I'm saying that, like, we don't even walk in a straight line, because what you just mentioned, I love that example. We when we step with our right foot, like our right foot, let's say, our body shifts to the right, and then it shifts to the left. We're literally constantly, I'm kind of exaggerating, doing this, but we tend to think that we're going in a straight line. We were not designed to be in perfect balance or in harmony, just like you mentioned with that, performer that's able to do it, and his body is moving, right? Same thing when, I think this is kind of relatable to financial planning and doing all of these things. When a plane takes off, it only knows 2 points. It knows where it's taking from, and where it's going. In between, it's never on course. It's constantly adjusting. They don't they're off course like 90% of the time, or I don't know exactly, maybe it's even more. But it's those course correction, those adjustments. That's really what life is. And often when I look at my life, a lot of things that I thought were there, and that's why I use the saying, life is either working for me or working on me. When it's working for me, hey, I'm happy, everything's going well. When they're not, it's not that life's working against me. It's just needs to be adjusted so that maybe I'm missing something. I need to learn a lesson, or I'm not seeing something in a way so that it can start working for me. And really, what you're mentioning with the whole balance and all of that, nothing is perfectly. They're always a little bit to the left, to the right. It's that constant adjustment. And at the end, it comes down to just knowing what it is that you want, and is what you're doing giving you the results that you want. Because so many people are kind of upset and saying, oh, look at this, poor me. You know what? Whatever situation you're in, you've made choices and decisions previous to that have led you to this point. That's the good news, because moving forward, you can make different choices and decisions to lead you out of this. And I think it's just keeping that in perspective.
I think in that too, there's the reaction piece, right? Because I think something that comes up for people all the time when we hear that is, well, something was done to me, and I didn't choose for that awful thing to happen, for that person to do that thing, to be, whatever that might be. And so, yes, 100%, we don't choose what happens to us, but in that we still have a choice in how we're going to respond.
Respond or react to it, 100%. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Mike, as we're kind of wrapping up, if you could leave listeners with one key takeaway about creating a strong financial future, whatever, for themselves, their business, or their family, what would it be?
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the simple word that we usually don't like in any element of our life, which is discipline. You talked about, losing nearly 100 pounds, building whatever part of us that we want to improve, whether that's financially, relationally, spiritually, physically. any area in our life, it comes down to having the discipline to do the things that need to be done in order to get the success that we want. And so in financial planning is no different. It's basically living within our means, right? And taking that excess and making the right moves and investing. And the right moves doesn't necessarily mean, finding the right company to invest in or what have you. It's just fundamental basics, right? That the saving and investing and growing wealth come down to some pretty basic strategies that are boring at the end of the day, but they're just systems.
Yeah, and again, everything can be gamified, and everything can have a system and how it's set up. Mike, this has been an incredible conversation. I know our listeners are going to get a ton of value from everything that you've shared. If someone wants to learn more about you and what you do, maybe connect with you or even follow your insights, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. I think that's how we connected as well, Daniel. But yeah, I'd love to connect with folks on LinkedIn and go from there.
That's great. That's awesome. Hey, Mike, again, thank you for sharing with this incredible conversation that we've had. Really appreciate you sharing your journey from your time at the Marines and actually your time also. You mentioned car sales. That's where you started, right?
I did, yeah. While I was still
from there to now, mentoring and helping financial advisors to, helping them align their actions with their intentions. It's clear that, you have a passion for growth and leadership, and you're making a real impact. So again, thank you for coming to the show. And for those listening, if Mike's insights resonated with you and you want to learn more, connect with him, be sure to reach out to Mike. Again, Mike, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. It's really been great.
Yeah, my pleasure, Daniel. Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the Finance Leader Podcast. For more conversations with thought leaders. Until next time, take care and keep building your financial future on solid principles.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Finance Leaders Retirement Insights.